Bushman's Hole, Deep Dive Recovery Death. On January 8, 2005, world-class diver Dave Shaw prepared for an extremely dangerous mission. He was at Bushman's Hole, a deep underwater cave in South Africa. 10 years earlier, another diver named Dion Dreyer had died in the same cave. Dion Dreyer's body had sunk to the bottom at 886 feet deep. At 886 feet, the water pressure is crushing and deadly. Very few divers in the world have the skills to reach such extreme depths. Dave Shaw was one of the most experienced technical divers alive. He had successfully completed many deep dives that other divers considered impossible. Shaw decided he would try to recover Dion Dreyer's body and bring it to the surface. He wanted to give Dion's family closure after 10 years of waiting. Shaw knew this would be the most dangerous dive of his entire career. He attached a small camera to his diving helmet to record the recovery. The camera would document every moment of the dive for safety and training purposes. Shaw entered the water and began his descent into Bushman's Hole. The deeper he went, the darker and colder the water became. At extreme depth, every movement must be slow and careful. After many minutes of descending, Shaw reached the bottom at 886 feet. His helmet camera recorded him finding Dion Dreyer's body in the darkness. Shaw began working to secure the body so he could bring it up. As he worked, something went terribly wrong. Shaw became entangled in a nylon line attached to the body. The line wrapped around his equipment and body in the freezing water. He tried to free himself, but the entanglement only got worse. The footage from his helmet camera shows his breathing becoming faster and faster. At extreme depth, breathing too rapidly causes carbon dioxide to build up in the blood. Carbon dioxide buildup makes a diver confused, panicked, and unable to think clearly. Shaw's breathing continued to accelerate as the CO2 poisoning took hold. The camera recorded 17 minutes of his struggle in total darkness. His movements became slower and less coordinated as the poison affected his brain. Eventually, Dave Shaw lost consciousness from the carbon dioxide buildup. He passed out while still entangled 886 feet below the surface. Dave Shaw never regained consciousness and died in Bushman's Hole. His body sank back to the bottom along with Dion Dreyer's remains. Plura cave diving tragedy. On February 6, 2014, 5 Finnish divers arrived at Plura cave in Norway. The cave system was completely flooded with ice-cold water. The divers were experienced technical cave divers who had trained for years. Their plan was to swim through the underwater cave passages together. The dive would take them over 100 meters deep into the flooded cave. At that depth, the water pressure is extreme and dangerous. The divers wore GoPro cameras on their helmets to document the expedition. They entered the freezing water and began swimming into the dark cave system. The passages started out wide but became narrower as they went deeper. At over 100 meters deep, they reached an extremely tight section. The narrow passage was barely wide enough for a diver to squeeze through. 2 of the Finnish divers attempted to swim through the narrow gap. Without warning, both divers became wedged in the tight passage. Their diving equipment got stuck against the rocks on all sides. They could not move forward or backward through the restriction. The trapped divers began to panic as they realized they were stuck. The other 3 divers tried desperately to help free their friends, but the passage was so narrow that only one person could fit at a time. Working in the confined space at extreme depth was almost impossible. Time was running out as the trapped divers' air supply ran low. Despite all efforts to save them, both wedged divers died in the passage. Their bodies remained stuck over 100 meters deep in the flooded cave. The 3 surviving divers had no choice but to leave their friends behind. They made the agonizing swim back to the surface alone. The GoPro cameras had captured the chaos of the initial accident. The footage showed the moment the divers became wedged and the failed rescue attempts. The surviving divers were devastated by the loss of their friends. Norwegian authorities said the bodies were too deep to recover safely. The official position was that the 2 divers would remain in the cave forever. But the 3 survivors could not accept leaving their friends in the darkness. They decided to conduct a secret, unauthorized recovery mission. Without telling authorities, they returned to Plura Cave weeks later. The survivors brought their GoPro cameras again to film everything. They dove back down over 100 meters to where their friends had died. The recovery process was incredibly dangerous and emotionally devastating. They had to carefully free the bodies from the narrow passage. Every moment at that extreme depth risked their own lives. After hours of difficult work, they successfully recovered both bodies. The survivors brought their friends back to the surface and to their families. The entire unauthorized recovery mission was captured on their helmet cameras. Blue hole Yuri Lipski death. On April 28, 2000, diving instructor Yuri Lipski arrived at the Blue Hole in Egypt. The Blue Hole is a massive underwater sinkhole in the Red Sea. While it is technically a sinkhole, the ceiling and walls create a cave-like environment. The Blue Hole is one of the most dangerous dive sites in the world. Hundreds of divers have died in this location over the years. Yuri Lipski was an experienced diving instructor who knew the risks. He decided to attempt what divers call a bounce dive. A bounce dive means descending rapidly to extreme depth and returning quickly. Lipski planned to dive alone to the bottom of the Blue Hole. The bottom was over 295 feet deep. He carried a handheld camera to record his dive. Lipski entered the water and began his rapid descent into the blue abyss. The camera recorded his view as he dropped deeper and deeper. The walls of the sinkhole surrounded him on all sides like a cave. As he descended past 165 feet, the danger zone began. At extreme depth, nitrogen in a diver's air supply becomes toxic to the brain. This condition is called nitrogen narcosis, and it feels like being drunk. Divers with nitrogen narcosis cannot think clearly or make good decisions. They become confused, disoriented, and unable to judge danger properly. Lipski continued descending rapidly past 230 feet, then 260 feet. The camera shows he was dropping far too fast for a safe dive. By the time he reached over 295 feet, the nitrogen narcosis had taken full effect. His brain was severely impaired by the toxic nitrogen in his blood. At the bottom of the Blue Hole, Lipski realized something was terribly wrong. The camera captured his frantic movements as panic set in. He tried desperately to inflate his buoyancy compensator device. The buoyancy compensator is a vest that helps divers float back to the surface. But Lipski was too confused and disoriented to operate his equipment correctly. His hands fumbled with the controls as the nitrogen narcosis clouded his mind. The footage shows his breathing becoming rapid and panicked. Every breath at that extreme depth consumed his limited air supply faster. Lipski tried over and over to inflate the vest and rise from the bottom. But his impaired brain could not coordinate the simple actions needed. Time was running out as his air supply dropped critically low. The camera recorded his movements becoming slower and weaker. Eventually, Yuri Lipski collapsed on the seafloor at over 295 feet deep. He'd lost consciousness from the combination of nitrogen narcosis and air depletion. Yuri Lipski died alone on the bottom of the Blue Hole. His body was recovered days later along with his handheld camera. The camera had recorded every moment of his final dive. Tham Luang, Cave Rescue Mission. On June 23, 2018, 12 young soccer players and their coach entered Tham Luang Cave in Thailand. The boys were members of the Wild Boars soccer team. They planned to explore the cave for just a short time after practice. While they were inside, heavy monsoon rains began pouring down outside. The rain filled the cave passages with rushing floodwater. Within hours, the boys and their coach were trapped deep inside the cave. The flooded passages blocked their only way out to safety. News of the trapped soccer team spread across Thailand and then the entire world. Rescue teams from multiple countries rushed to Tham Luang Cave to help. Thai Navy SEALs arrived to lead the dangerous underwater rescue operation. Expert cave divers from Britain, Australia, and other nations joined the mission. The rescue divers brought GoPro cameras and helmet cams to document the conditions. They entered the flooded cave to search for the trapped boys. The water inside the cave had zero visibility from mud and sediment. The divers could not see anything in front of them in the murky water. They had to feel their way along guide ropes in complete darkness. The cave passages twisted through sections called the S-curve. These narrow, flooded passages were extremely dangerous to navigate. The divers had to squeeze through tight restrictions while underwater. One wrong move could trap a diver or cause them to lose their air supply. After 9 days of searching, British divers Rick Stanton and John Valanthan made an incredible discovery. Their helmet cameras captured the moment they found all 13 people alive. The boys and their coach were huddled on a small, dry ledge deep in the cave. They had survived for 9 days without food in complete darkness. The world celebrated that they were alive, but the rescue mission was just beginning. Getting the boys out through the flooded passages would be extremely dangerous. Thai Navy SEAL Saman Kunan volunteered to help with the rescue operation. He was a former SEAL who came out of retirement to save the trapped boys. Saman Kunan's job was to deliver oxygen tanks to stations along the rescue route. The divers needed these oxygen supplies to make the long journey through the flooded cave. On July 6, 2018, Saman Kunan was swimming back through the cave after delivering tanks. He was alone in the dark, flooded passage when something went wrong. Saman Kunan ran out of air and lost consciousness underwater. By the time other divers found him, it was too late. Saman Kunan died in Tham Luang cave while trying to save the 13 trapped people. Despite the tragedy, the rescue operation continued. The team developed a plan to sedate the boys and carry them through the water. Expert cave divers guided each unconscious boy through the deadly passages. Over 3 days, all 12 boys and their coach were successfully rescued.